Next speaker is somebody who we will probably we won't have heard from this kind of speaker before, and we're incredibly lucky to have her. No pressure. So I'm very happy to be joined by Nell Skinner, Judge Nell Skinner, who is the President of the Children's Court of New South Wales.
I'm not sure whether to stand up or stay seated, so I'm just going to pace around, and if that drives anyone crazy, they can throw something at me. This is a very difficult stage to share, so Jackie and Ben have got some extraordinary stories, and I'm probably going to be your comic relief. The way that I manage the trauma of my job is with a terrible sense of humour, and that will come out, as you'll see, during the next 17 minutes and 44 seconds. How this started is, some of you will know my sister Claire, and she knows that I'm a terrible meddler like she is, and she suggested I speak to Andy. And in my meddling, this slide that you'll see is my attempt to try and get my brain onto a screen, but it doesn't go straight. It has to go through a young person, so I have to write that out with highlighters and then get a young person to put it on a screen, and then it comes to you. But what I was trying to do was to see that if, you know, sometimes you're trying to figure out something like, well, how do I get from Australia to New Zealand? And you hope that when you zoom out on Google Earth, it'll just go Australia, New Zealand, and next thing you know, you're on the moon. So this is the moon of the systems that we have developed to prevent harm to children and to respond to harm to children. And we are all part of this system. So when I was speaking to Andy, it was because I was absolutely desperate in saying, all right, I sit in the Children's Court. We make decisions about whether children should be removed and restored to their parents, and we make decisions about whether children should be incarcerated. In saying that, I want to acknowledge that we are on traditional land, that the decisions that have been made by me and my predecessors have had really significant impact on Aboriginal people, and that we need to work together in identifying the harm that we've caused and how to redress that harm. Because currently in New South Wales, 47% of the kids in care are Aboriginal, 55% of the kids in custody are Aboriginal, and the last census had 3.4%, I think, of the New South Wales population was Aboriginal. So let's ground ourselves in that. And then zoom out again. The point of this, in part, was to say the court has this really unique overview of the systems that we have developed to intervene and prevent harm. Each of us have a role to play in that, and in our care and protection jurisdiction, leading into our criminal jurisdiction, what we have done through the politicians is we've categorised behaviour as crimes. If we categorise types of behaviour, it gives us a mechanism for responding to that behaviour. But if I call it behaviour, I hope you as health professionals see that you might have a role. What we are currently doing in New South Wales is we're locking up 10, 11, 12 and 13-year-olds, and I can't even see them over the dock. They squeak, they're in year 4. But they're doing aggravated break and enters, and they're driving cars at 200 k's an hour, and we don't know what else to do because we haven't yet developed a mechanism outside the criminal justice system to respond to the behaviours. So that's what I thought I would talk about. And then there was this email, and it went between us, and I found out what they were talking about, and I thought, oh, this is really bad. I don't know about that stuff. That's hard. I'm in the job of preventing harm, but I see that we can't prevent all harm. That what I see is there'll be a baseline, that our job is to work together to try and reduce the incidence of harm and to reduce the severity of harm. And so when I'm not going to talk you through this, you're all luckily clever and you can figure it out, but when I have gone and met with remote community members, I've realised that the mandatory reporting scheme we have set up to help us manage the risk from our perspective, but we are pushing people underground. That if you are an Aboriginal woman in a community where someone breaks your arm, the last thing in the world you would do is go to an emergency department, because if you go to an emergency department, they're full of mandatory reporters. They make a report to welfare, who makes a report to the cops. Your partner gets locked up, your kids get removed, and your arm's still broken. So when we spoke, I realised that Ben was really interested in the role of expert witnesses. And I thought, realistically, I want to be interesting. I don't want to waste your time. What do you care about? You care about when you are going to be on the line. So I thought it might be handy to talk about these roles we share and then to talk to you about how you identify and respond to that risk. So again, thinking too much. Luckily, I think mostly this slide I could do myself, but I felt pretty chuffed with it. Together, we are trying to prevent harm, but there will still be some incidents. What we want is 100% of incidents to be reported. They're only going to be reported if the response is sympathetic and confidential and non-critical, and if the action that flows is proportionate to the incident. Even if all that works, but the long-term outcome is worse, why would anyone report? So, controversially, let's then talk about Brittany Higgins. If you had someone who was close to you that reported to you that they had been sexually assaulted, would you in good conscience recommend that they go to the police and then they pursue a prosecution? Outcome? So together we have to come up with a different response where someone gets to engage in, there has been an incident, I've been harmed, I want your assistance, and we need to work together to support them to control a response and make sure the outcome is better. And there is our challenge. So this is, all of us sit in preventing harm with a role in assessing risk. I do make myself laugh because I'm actually way more hopeless than this pretends to be, where I go, okay, let's read Thinking Fast and Slow. Now that has hundreds of pages, and so I don't know, but I'm pretty time poor, so are you probably. You can kind of get the gist early on. So I was probably about 18 pages in when I started talking to people about it. I thought, well, this is pretty cocky. So I made it through to the 300s. But it is really interesting because it talks about these systems of thinking. So human system one is intuition. Intuition's fed by your experience. Your experience teaches you what's safe and what's unsafe, and your caveman brain or your lizard brain responds in particular ways. System two is that more laboured thinking, like, this is hard, I've got to put my phone down and concentrate. And then flow is that, oh wow, I'm really enjoying myself and I lost some hours. Who knew what was happening there? That must be a really good Netflix series. So, what I realised in that is that, and I think that the parallels it draws is if you're going for a swim, you will be worried that you're going to be eaten by a shark, and if you hop in a plane, you're going to be worried it's going to crash. But the stats tell you you're more likely to die in a car accident. But you drive every single day, and you know that you drove yesterday safely, so you're going to drive safely again today, and you're going to keep worrying about dying in the plane crash and getting nibbled by a shark. So it shows us those flaws in our perception. And I think when we talk about how do you treat people, I was riding my bike to work one day in Newcastle and this diamond python came out across the path, and I was reading this book, and so I dealt with that with my usual grace. I swore and I fell off my bike and I swore more. And every time I went past that bit of path, I looked for that snake. And I thought, I'm seeing snakes. And each of you will see snakes. You'll get up every morning and you'll go in and you'll see people that are similar to someone you've seen before, and you will make assumptions on that person because they look like a snake to you and you've seen snakes before. And as professionals, our challenge is to step back and stop looking for snakes and just letting people be who they are. So then I was so impressed by that 347 pages of that book that then I started reading Noise, A Flaw in Human Judgment. Again, I'm probably 140 pages into that, there are many more to go, but it looks at preventing harm. It looks at bail decisions and sentence decisions and recruitment and insurance underwriting and child removal. And it says, so Team A, that's a really good decision. That person made those 5 decisions consistently and it hit the target. Or those 5 people made that decision consistently. Team B, that's a biased decision. Team C is a noisy decision. And I could do that. Honestly, you could give me 5 bail decisions, they could be exactly the same, and I could hit that target all over the place depending on how many snacks I've had and how many snakes I've seen that day. Team D is bias and noise. So humans, what they've been able to assess is that processes are much better at making decisions and predicting harm than humans are. That about 50 to 60% of the time, the best human can accurately predict a risk. And about 60 to 70% of the time, the best computer can accurately predict a risk. So we go, it's not that much better than us. You know, what am I going to do? If they take away my risk assessment capacity, I'm going to be sitting around watching Netflix. I'm actually getting a bit sick of it. So we look at it and go, that doesn't make sense. So from my perspective in the court, we will see an intimate partner homicide. and we will see 28 different risk factors that led to that woman being murdered by her partner. There'd been a history of coercive control. She'd left the relationship. There was an AVO. He breached the AVO. She filed family law proceedings. He got her and he strangled her and she died. And we say we should have seen it coming. But you know what? That'll happen in 10,000 matters without a single death. So we can hindsight predict, but we can't forecast. And what we're asking you to do is forecast. So Ben will talk to you a little bit, I think, about those treatment things, in that we're all full. We've got limited resources. You have to be assessing risk every single day. And having had these conversations, then I thought I should talk to you about expert witnesses, but there will be questions if you want to talk to me about that youth justice side, and particularly that age of criminal responsibility side, because I know it is something we're all interested in. I've been involved in a couple of proceedings recently that involve experts. And it's made me think about when you are treating children and adults, you are running through what a potential diagnosis could be and working out what action you need to take to reduce harm or get someone to safety. And then what needs to be on your radar, I think, are those things like, am I a mandatory reporter? If I report this, do I do harm to the therapeutic relationship? Are they likely to come back? What notes do I write? If those notes are subpoenaed, what happens? Will I need to write a statement? If I have to go to the coroner's court or the crime court or the civil court, what are the expectations of me? And how do I manage this alongside my colleagues? So in the books I've read, in that book Noise, one of the other things they talked about is that individuals are all over the place with their decisions, but group decisions are even worse. So you go, okay, I might talk to my colleagues about this, but the problem is your biases and your noise then infect each other, and you start to lean towards whoever the strongest advocate for a position is. So we have some vulnerabilities in it. But I thought it is really difficult for any of you to be working out, well, what is your expertise to be in a position to give evidence in court to inform the court's decision? The burden of proof is held by the person who's filed the proceedings. Obviously, in criminal proceedings, that's beyond reasonable doubt. And in civil proceedings and care proceedings, that's about on the balance of probabilities. Is it more probable or not? And the Brigginshaw standard's like a slightly tweaked balance of probabilities to go, but it needs to be even more reliable and capable than you would normally look at. So I think when you go into court, like if we step back, because it would be really boring to talk to you about the notes that you're writing, I think we would prefer you to write it a little bit more neatly, but I understand that you're under pressure. When you're preparing your statement, you need to know that you're not making friends, you're just a witness, you're part of the system. If you think about the law's challenge here is to find out what happened. What information can I give them to assist them in determining what happened? So our skill set is in receiving and weighting evidence. And so we go, all right, well, this is a matter that involves some expertise, be it forensic or clinical or a psychologist, psychiatrist, social worker. We are leaning on your expertise to help us figure out what happened or what the right thing to do is. And so in these unexplained injuries, non-accidental injury matters that I've had, the focus has been on that. Was it an injury or was it organic? Could it have been an illness? What caused it? When there's a death in the coroner's court, it goes back to those same things. Help us backtrack. Help us find out what marker you have seen during the course of treatment or a forensic assessment that help you form a conclusion about what might have occurred. When we look at what was the cause, did someone do this to themselves? Has it come from somewhere else? And that feeds into that care and protection risk or those criminal proceedings. It's different for coronial proceedings. One of the things that really struck me was because I was sitting in the care jurisdiction in Newcastle, there was a paediatric gastroenterologist who's the best human in the entire world, and I love him, and if that sounds mildly inappropriate, then that's fine. He was treating one of our children. And he was involved in a factitious disorder case that ran to a prosecution in the district court. And because one of my children needed quite a lot of paediatric gastroenterologist care, we saw a bit of him and we started talking about that. And he came out of the court proceedings concerned about a couple of different features, and it caused me to think about it more than I otherwise would have. And we have since gone into a program with the DPP to look at training the lawyers in how to identify experts and talk to experts and conference them properly. But he wanted to know, how do you choose your experts? how do you weight their expertise? And what are we to do when the standard of proof is beyond reasonable doubt, but as scientists and doctors, we're taught to express ourselves with uncertainty? So I don't have any solutions to that, but one of the things that caused me to think about was, you are in a little microcosm of health world where you've all tried to get your different qualifications to show that you're better or not as good as other people like we do in law world. In policing, they do this too. So I know that a senior constable's senior to a constable, and I know a chief inspector is senior to an inspector, but where a sergeant and a superintendent sit in there, I have absolutely no idea. So I've offended a lot of cops. In law, where, solicitors, and then some people become trial advocates, and then they become barristers, and then will be some senior counsel, and then they go to the local court or the district court or the Supreme Court, and then we're like, oh, you're in the Supreme Court, hello. Anyway, when my husband became senior counsel, this German friend was like, oh, this is so exciting. She said, does he get more curls? And I went, yeah, to be honest, he does. So I know, because I'm in the law, that just because someone's a silk, it should mean that they're the best, but God, there are some young guns. So you're going to get frustrated because you go, well, what's the training, study and experience? Here I am a public doctor. I work in a training hospital. I've published 38 different papers. I've worked with more patients than you. I've studied more people than you, and I work in peds. So you should listen to me. And that idiot that you just piped in from the Netherlands, private specialist, only works with adults, doesn't know a bloody thing. And I'm there going, can you both tell me what a bruise is? So in these cases we've had endocrinologists and radiologists and geneticists and paediatricians, and we're all over the place, and I'm like, wow, guys, you've been studying a really long time. I still want to know what a bruise is. So in talking to Ben about the proceedings that he's unfortunately been involved in, we'd all do anything for him not to have had that experience, is that the state brings the witnesses together. And one of the things that I found that was really interesting too from a legal perspective is that where there are risks of harm to children, the first thing you do is you go and talk to each other. So by the time I get the experts, all of those New South Wales experts have kind of hot tubbed themselves over and over and over again. I'm worried about this. What do you think about this? Should we do something about this? Should we call the parvan? Like, what are we going to do now? So then they all go and write their individual statements with their individual expertise. And then they come to court and we go, did you talk to anyone about this? And they're like, yeah, all of us. And we're like, oh. Because in court, we've been so busy saying, oh, sorry, you were over in that corner. Did you see the green BMW? You said it was a red BMW. You said it was a blue Hyundai. Who are we going to believe? Did any of you talk to each other? Or sexual assault complainants in that, yeah, he touched me and he touched me and he touched me. And we're like, well, you all talked. So we can't trust that happened because we think he just jumped on the bandwagon. But we get to experts and we're like, yeah, you all talk as much as you want. So I wonder if you think about that, if you learn about those predictors in risk and group decision making, whether in fact you want to set up some kind of independent way that you go, look, I'm just going to give my opinion to an independent, and they're all going to give their opinion to an independent. And then that independent's going to have a look at it and go, look, I think these risk factors are so significant we need to call welfare and that kid needs to be removed, or whatever it is. So I can't assist you in how we weight evidence except to ask you to explain to us why it would matter. And I want you then to be honest about whether it truly does. So as someone who would really like to be the best of everything all the time, and especially heaps better than my sisters, I'm probably self-aware enough to go, well, you're not going to be, and sometimes people will know more than you do. And so if a bruise is a bruise is a bruise, does it matter whether it's the endocrinologist or the radiologist or the paediatrician who tells us? And if it does matter, if someone's going, look, there has been an interference with the IV line, I'm a paediatric gastroenterologist. The reason that I have the expertise to explain that this intervention happened and why I am certain that it happened, or why I'm as certain as a doctor or a scientist is ever going to express themselves as being, is because my training and my expertise and my study have informed me that there is no other conclusion other than that this happened. And the reason that my expertise differs from that of an adult is because of the way that an adult body is made compared to a child body. But unless that's explained to us, we're just still going to be asking if it's a bruise. I feel like that really undermines any integrity that there might be in the system, and maybe I'm just speaking in my own pathetic way about what I would do, and there will be many lawyers who are far better versed in health. But I think it might be a useful perspective when you're going in to see what's possible. I've already exceeded my time limit, but I was just going to talk about this very, very quickly. The police will always say they're the only 24/7 service. And as a sister of an emergency physician, again, I don't know the difference between a registrar, a physician, a fellow, just making that clear, as you don't know about the difference between us or the cops. So the emergency department's open too. But we have separated their life into our different compartments, and we expect that they're going to be able to access them independently, even though they don't have clothing or food or transport or phone credit or the internet. And what we need to work out is who are those service navigators that actually give them what they want? Who can they trust to work with them and support them to access priority services to reduce harm to kids? This is the challenge, I think, is that we need to actually communicate and collaborate far better to reduce those gaps between our different lanes and start to say, all right, sorry, we separated your life into you can go to emergency for this and you can go to the GP for this and you can go to the mental health unit for that, and now you can go to 3 different courts to sort that out. Let's start doing it from a human services perspective of what do you need from us and how do we help you get it. So it is a difficult, I was thinking, am I a rose between thorns? And I'm like, they're roses. I'm like a cactus flower, maybe. So I hope it is a useful and different perspective, and I look forward to questions, and we'll go back to now some difficult stuff, Ben.